In today's cast, we are going to talk about the properties of a curve, the maximum and the minimum points. This is especially when you are dealing with functions and graphs, or when you're dealing with the differentiation. The first task is to key in the function of the curve that you want to deal with. So my function is y is equals to x cubed plus 3x squared minus 3. So key in the value and then you enter. When you enter, you get the following curve. So this is the curve that has been defined up here. So let us look at the different properties that we have at the maximum and the minimum point. So we are realizing that at maximum point, it is the turning point, and the minimum point is also the turning point. But note that such curves have global maximum or minimum because they are continuous. You can see the way they are continuous. Some of the graphs have global maximum and minimums. But in this case, let us just deal with this maximum point or the turning points. What are the properties? So what we are going to do, we are going to identify a point on the curve. So let me identify point A there. Then at this point, I'm going to bring in the tangent at that particular point. So I'm bringing a tangent at point A. Let's see, the tangent at point A. So we are going to use discovery method to find out what happens when this tangent moves round. So the tangent is going to move round the curve. But you see, even if the tangent moves round, we cannot do much unless we define the gradient at each particular point on the curve. Therefore, I bring in the gradient of that particular tangent. So what is the gradient of this tangent at point A? So we are getting that the gradient of this tangent is 7.62. So therefore, the discovery here is that as you teach this topic, make the students to discover through engagement what happens to monitor the change of gradient from point A as you move upwards. So what then happens? So let's move with this, let's move with the curve and see. So what then happens? So as we move up, the gradient is reducing, the gradient reduces, the gradient reduces, but it is positive. When we reach the turning point, the gradient becomes 0. So the engagement of the learner is to discover and monitor the change of the gradient to the turning point, which is now 0. If we move further from 0 downwards, the gradient now turns to be negative. Now it is -2. It turns to be negative. It becomes negative until when we reach the minimum, the turning point, the gradient is 0. So then, after being 0, then what happens again? The gradient also changes, and then again it becomes positive as you move up. See, it's positive, it is 6, it's 7, and so on. Then, what do you want your learners to find out here? You will need your learners to recognize that when the when we have a maximum point, when you have a maximum point here, the gradient becomes positive. Then the gradient becomes 0, then the gradient becomes negative. So when we have positive, when we have positive here, positive gradient, and then we have 0 gradient here at this point, and then we have negative gradient at this point, then we have a maximum point. This is what the learners have to explore at that particular time. So you engage the learners to explore and find out about these changes. Then when we have a minimum, then the learners have to discover that we have a negative. Then at this point here also we have a 0, and then we have a positive gradient on this other side. This kind of discovery is very important when the learners are doing their own research and develop their proficiency in this particular topic. Therefore, what are we getting here? What we are getting here is that as the teacher engages the learners here, we need to apply several skills of inquiry, because we want the learners to allow the learners then at that point to explain their findings. So after this, what else do we need the teacher to do? Because you want to engage learners in a conceptual way, the teacher has to bring in other important conceptual aspects in this particular topic. What are the conceptual aspects? Now look at these are railway lines. Is there any relationship that the learners can see from these turning points of a railway line? So you leave it to them to explain and discover by their own. Is there any relationship also the learner can gain from this? Can they see any relationship with the turning points with this bridge? These are the conceptual issues that we need to make with the candidates. Now look at this the roller coaster. It is the same concept that is used in various areas. So look at also the aeroplanes as they fly. What else can we learn from here? Let the learners discover, research more on this particular area so that they get a deep understanding on this concept of maximum and minimum points on a curve. For inquiry, you can use the following contacts, and we can assist one another to develop more materials using GeoGebra. Thank you.